Okay, so now an update. Louis has said he picked up some Privateer Press P3, and I quite like these paints. These are a good paint. I don't like that they come in these sort of pots. One of the big drawbacks is these caps can be really hard to put on and off, and don't ever do it one-handed. I speak from experience. Very high pigmented paints. They are possibly the most pigmented on the market in the range of physical gaming paints, rather than, I don't know about the model paints. I don't know how, like Vallejo and that, I don't know how they rate with them, but I think in the gaming paints, these are very, very there's just a lot of pigment, which is good. They can be thinned, and I typically thin everything, but they are good. They are really good paints, and if you can find them, in Canada you get 6 for the price of 5 if you buy their box sets. Their box sets come in colour ranges that are designed for the game. So this one was like Troll Blood Highlight. So I bought the Troll Blood box, and it came with 6 paints that are all related to that. So if you do that though, providing they have the colours you want, it works out quite economical. I don't know if there's more in this or less than the Games Workshop line, but they're good. They really are good. A lot of colours, not military based. You know, if you're doing something military, I wouldn't bother unless there's something that you can sort of use or mix, because the colours aren't going to match. They're designed for the war machine and hordes and stuff like that. They're not designed for military colours. But if you're using it for anything else, I really do recommend them. They are really good, except for the pots. That's the only thing to work around. So what I'm going to do today, try not to let this go too long, is again looking at the Mini and trying to decide what's going to be easier to do now rather than later. And in this case I'm going to do all this sort of back area. Now I'm going to have to probably do some touch-ups, because I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get into this bottom area here without touching the exhaust pipe. Because the reason why I'm going to do this back part is it's going to be easier to just sort of get a bit messy in here. It doesn't have to be perfect getting all these areas done, than it is to do these upper areas and then try to do those back areas. If you're going to touch up anything, touch up what's easier, and in this case these upper areas are going to be easier to touch up than painting these all up nice and then getting in. Bill of Panzerman Bunker suggested that I drill out the exhausts, and we have. Now I could have used a bigger drill bit. I didn't have one, so this was the biggest I had, so they're roughly in the right spot. They're not great, but you know, this sort of can be like casing around it. I also drilled out one of the guns. The drill bit was too big to really do this, because if you use a too big drill bit, what will happen is it'll actually burst out and you'll actually destroy part of the Mini, and that's not going to be good. So it was a good suggestion. And if you had a bigger one, you know, you probably it would have been a little bit better, but they're okay. I mean, this Mini is not designed to be show quality. It's just designed to be, you know, hopefully half decent. Colour scheme took me a while to decide upon, and I think we're going to be doing a green sort of bike and a purple rider. It's not necessarily going to fit to any proper Space Marine chapter, but what the hell. So I'm going to use, when doing P3 paints, because you don't have a dropper, you sort of scoop it out, and I'm using horsehair for this. This is a crappy brush, dollar store brush, absolutely useless for painting. I guess they sell them to kids maybe schools buy them, like for kindergarten, stuff like that. But, like if you're actually going to paint, do not bother with horsehair. But for actually just, getting paint out and mixing and stuff like that, nothing wrong with it. Anything that takes work away from your main brush, your good brush, is a good idea. It'll last longer. I'm also going to use, this is a Vallejo product. It's basically it's a thinner. But what it does, instead of using water can sometimes make the paint separate. So you get water and paint. What this does is it works as the thinner, but without the separation. I've used it with most of the paints that I use. I mean, it was specifically designed for Vallejo, but I found that it works pretty much with all of them. I haven't had any terrible reactions. And then to give us just a little bit more flow, I did 3 drops of my glaze medium, which I like. So because of the pigment and the thickness of this paint, you could have got away with, 5 drops of water, 6 drops of water. I'm sort of working with that amount. So there was 5 drops. There was 3 of the glaze and 2 of the thinner. And there is a lot of pigment. When you wash it out in the water's already black-green. This is a black-green colour I'm using. And this doesn't have to be perfect. This stage, it really doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, it's good if you can. I mean, it's a good habit not to put paint everywhere. But if you get a slip like I just did, it doesn't really matter. Because I'm just going to paint over that. And that's why it's easier to do it this way than it is to do it the other way. To paint these high areas and then go in, I just don't like doing that. I'm not the neatest of painters. I don't generally enter stuff in painting competitions. I find that it, for me anyway, just doesn't interest me. I like going to them, but I don't like entering as much. It's just, I think if you're going to be serious about it, you've really got to put time and effort in. And that for me is the problem, because you start to put a lot of effort in, extra effort, and if you don't win, it can be a bit demoralizing. Or even if you don't win, sometimes it's just, some of the judges are a bit funny with what they see. And this hobby is very subjective. You get a lot of guys will tell you that, you have to paint Space Marines in a set colour, or you got to do it in a set way, and I just don't think that's true. But if they've grown up that way, if that's what they really believe, you could still do an amazing paint job, but if you don't fit their idea of what they want in that particular competition, then you can do badly, even through no fault of your own. So I think if you're going to go to painting comps, either be really just thick-skinned about it, or just go to meet people and have a good time, look at what they've done. You'll see some great stuff. But just don't be demoralized, like, you can work on something for 100 hours, and some of these, a couple of French painters I like, and they do 200-300 hours for golden demons and stuff like that. And I can't imagine working those kind of hours on, this sort of scale. It just boggles the mind. But of course, if that's if you're going into games day and stuff like that, you're going to be up against some really stiff competition. I think you're better just to go for the fun of it. Unless you are really good. So I'm going to be painting all these upper areas later, so I'm just being a little bit messy. I have seen people paint with P3 straight from the pot without any thinning, so you can do it. The advantage is the paint will go exactly where you want. Being thick, it won't ever bleed anywhere. But I find that just a little bit too glunky for me. When it dries, it can look really painted. Because I'm not quite as neat as I normally am, because I'm having to paint around the camera. Luckily it's a small camera, but still it's right in front of me, and I'm having to sort of bend around it, which is an interesting thing to do. Okay, like I always should swap to the other side, because right here when I went back I'm just sort of pushing the paint around a little bit. And you don't want to, well, if you want to push paint around, there's a push-pull method where you pull paint and push paint to where you want. If you're doing that, that's fine. But what was happening there was it just wasn't sticking because it was still wet, and I'm just moving it around, and that's not what I wanted to do. So if you notice that's happening, just move to another area of your mini. In this case, I came back to the side I originally worked on. I have an overall paint scheme in mind, but I have to do a little bit of looking online to see what some people have done. I'm interested to see a couple of different ideas. I'm doing these really fine areas. It's really important not to have too much paint on your brush. It's always better to come back with another layer than it is to have too much and have it bleed onto something you really don't want. Not perfect, but it will do. So I'm going to return to my Reaper paints. And the overall colour for the bike is going to be a green. So I'm going to start with their leaf green. It's part of their regular line, not the HD. So because of that, I'm not going to use quite as much of the thinners and the medium. This is quite a bright green, a little bit grassy. We're going to use a couple of darker ones as well. So I'm going to start while everything else is drying. On this front panel. These are thin coats, so I'm going to need to do a few to build up the colour. I always prefer doing thin coats. Not just because of how the end result is, but if you make a mistake, there's less paint. If you use especially like the P3, when it's thick, if you use it without thinning it, if you get it somewhere, it's harder to wipe off. Sometimes you can do it, sometimes it just sort of blends. When it's more thinned, if you get it somewhere you don't want, you can sometimes wipe it off quickly and it doesn't actually stick. Now the brush I'm using here is from Curry's, which is an art store. And if you have an art store near you, I totally recommend going to it. You can find all sorts of different brushes. Obviously they're designed for watercolours and oils and stuff like that, but I found the big difference is that the prices are a lot more competitive. You go to a hobby store, and the moment there's the word hobby put on it, then you can find the price goes up. And that's not just, you know, like everyone sort of hags on GW for this, but really, it's not just GW, it's all of them. Ah, that's what the problem is, that wheel is turning. It's probably what it's meant to do, but sometimes I glue the wheels so they don't turn, because I mean you don't actually push it around on, even if it was used in the game, it's going to be on a base, which is probably not a bad idea. That way it stops that slipping. Also, with using thin coats, it doesn't take long to dry, because now the front part is dry again. Of course, as you can see, if you're going to do an army, if you had, I think these come in boxes of 3. Like you can, I bought a single one, but I think they come in boxes of 3 as well. So you can obviously field, you know, a couple of them. And if you're going to paint them with these thin layers, it's going to take quite a while, and that might drive you mad. Which is why a lot of the, people complain about the GW style of painting, but really it's designed to get your army onto the table. It's not designed to be show quality. It's not designed even to be really good tabletop quality. Sometimes it's designed to be economic for a large army. So you've got to take everything, into the purpose of what it's designed for. This is coat 3 on the front. And I'm expecting to have to do about maybe 10 coats. Before the green's going to be dark enough that I'm going to be happy with it. If you do it nice and thin, even blowing on it can help it dry reasonably quickly. Had I been thinking about some of this stuff early on, I might have done the guns before putting it on the bike, since I've got to work up under the handlebars when I go to do the 2 guns. I've got to do it on both sides, but that's okay, we'll work around that. No, we might not have to do 10 coats. One thing about these Reapers is sometimes when you're putting them on, you go like, they look crap, or you think this is just not going on. When I first started using them, I was really concerned with the way they went on, but you go away and you come back in the morning and the colours were really vibrant. It seems that they sort of come in when they dry. I do like the Reapers, good value. And I'm just getting any excess paint. If there's too much when I'm first dip my brush in, I'm just touching the brush to the back of my hand and it just bleeds out the excess, and then it doesn't flood everywhere. You can use paper towel, paper, anything really. I just use my hand. This for me is more the fun part. Doing this sort of area, the background area. It's important when it's finished to have used that colour and that, but That's not the fun part. The fun part is actually doing the colour of the vehicle. This is when painting starts to get interesting. Okay. Anyway, you guys get the idea. I'll probably do a couple more coats, but you get the idea. So next time I might work on the. I'll finish this off, and then I might add some of the darker colour. Please tell me that was good.